My name is Henry Kashouty, and this is my wife, Keecha. We live in Hampton, Virginia. You want to know how I first became acquainted with Baba. It was in the year 1955 that I first heard of him, following our receiving a book as a Christmas present at the end of 1955 from a friend of ours that we had gotten interested in Eastern teachings, primarily Vedanta. I would say that the real introduction to the East for me was the Bhagavad Gita. After I read the Bhagavad Gita, I learned about the Vedanta Society in the United States, and I read every book I could get from them. These were some 4 volumes of Upanishads, Self-Knowledge, The Complete Gospel of Ramakrishna, The Complete Works of Vivekananda, and perhaps others that I can't recall at the present. This friend of ours that we had interested, whom we had gotten interested in Eastern teachings, sent us the book. She was very impressed with Eastern teachings. And the book she sent in the fall of 1955 was God Speaks. I don't think there was but one place in the entire United States, one bookstore that is, that carried this book at that time. She had found it and she sent it to us. I received the book at my office. I believe I read no more than the flyleaf, looked at the picture on the cover, and I may have called my wife immediately after that, and in any event, I called New York City, talked with this person, and I said something like, "Liz, find this man, he is the one." Sometime after that, a month or 2, we again heard from this person in New York. She said she had gone to the publishing company, Dodd Mead, and was informed by the publishing company that Meher Baba had been in the United States in 1952. They did not expect him back. At that point, I wrote a special delivery airmail letter to Baba, said something like, "Dear Meher Baba, I have your book, God Speaks. It has a great meaning for me. I want to meet you, and I don't think that's impossible." I received an airmail reply informing us that Baba would be in New York City the following May. So in May, my wife and I and our friend in New York, her sister and her sister's daughter, all made arrangements to meet with Baba at the Hotel Delmonico. I remember that Keecha had been instructed by her mother to buy a dress for her brother's engagement party. And because of that, I had been able to get in to see Baba before she arrived at the hotel. As I was waiting to go in to see Baba, of course, there were all sorts of thoughts in my head. I heard many different ideas from many different people. I was somewhat new to this business, although the Bhagavad Gita had a great deal that I could relate to in it. It seemed to cover values that I had always felt to some extent, crystallized, clarified so much, that had been there in me, but had been basically dormant. Well, I can't really recall what went through my mind as I was waiting. But finally the time for me to go into the room where Baba would receive each one of us came, and I can recall walking through the door, seeing him in a semi-reclined position, smiling, and my impression of him was, here was someone that was so very familiar to me. Remembering back, I would say that this person was someone I would have no difficulty telling anything at all about myself to him, though I saw him only for the first time. There was not a question of putting up a front. There was no need for that. I felt completely comfortable with him. I had no mysterious feelings, however, nothing that I would call mystical or spiritual. Beautiful, yes, because of the warmth and the freedom I felt with him. I could push aside everything else that was in my head. He has, from that point of view, although it was not until I became familiar with what Baba himself said about the spiritual hierarchy, the spiritual facts of life, the purpose of life, it was not until I familiarized myself with his own teachings that I could relate my own experiences and insight in those terms. But at that moment, for me, he was the authority. That's the way I would look at it. It was the authority. I was once asked how I knew he was God, and my reply was, I did not know he was God. Baba said he was God. I had no difficulty accepting Baba's own statement that he was God, although I would have a great deal of difficulty accepting that statement from anyone I had ever heard about before or had met or seen before. When Keecha arrived at the hotel, we had not been married too long, but from past experience I can recall that a great number of facts sort of escaped my memory, so I think it would be a good idea if I could borrow Keecha's memory for this so that she can say what happened. She has a good memory, and I'm sure that maybe some of the things that I've already said may not have been quite accurate, so I'll try and get her to fill in for me.
That's called passing the Baba buck. When I got to the Delmonico Hotel, Henry was supposed to have met me there at a certain time so that we could go in to see Baba together. But when I got there, it had already been in. And only once. And I was really irritated because I thought, the one big thing in their lives. And here he went on without me. So we saw John Bass in the little anteroom before he went in to see Baba. And John just walked up, introduced himself while we were feeling irritated at each other, and began talking to us, and right away captured our attention and interest. And he was very fascinating, although at times difficult to understand. And we sort of waited around, and then someone announced, is there anyone who has not been in to see Baba? And John says, these two people haven't been in to see Baba. And then Henry very quickly said, well, I have, but my wife hasn't, and I don't know if I can go again. And John said, well, come on, I'll see that you get in. And he walked us over to the door. And we stood at the door of the room that leads into where Baba was sitting on the couch. And as we stood there looking at him, there were people all around Baba, and he was directing somebody to do something, and somebody was getting up. And finally he looked up at us, and he put both hands on either side of his face and went like, oh, wow.
Something like this.
Yeah, it was, so it was just like, I don't know, like Henry said, a very familiar kind of a person, like we'd known before and had experiences with before, and it was sort of a remembering on our part that we had known Baba before. And we walked over, and Baba moved over, and he signaled for me to sit next to him, which I did. And I was sort of like in a daze, because it was like a wonderful dream or something. It was so pleasant being there, and it felt good to be in Baba's presence. Immediately felt good. And Henry sat or squatted in front of Baba on the floor. And then, without taking his eyes off of my eyes for an instant, Baba knocked an earring off of my ear. And while he was still looking at me, he reached down and put his hand on the earring, exactly where it was. And then he put it in my hand, and he closed my hand in it. And I felt like all the frustrations and irritations and just vanished from that moment on. Of course, more were to come, but that was a temporary oasis in the world of following Baba. So I'm going to... then he fed us a grape each. And I don't really remember what anybody said because I was looking at Baba so intensely. But I'm sure Henry remembers.
No, I don't. I do remember this. Before Key and I went in together, I had gone in to see Baba, and I told you what my reaction was, but that reaction was, in retrospect, thinking about it afterwards, and seeing the implicit acceptance of him and all of that. But after I don't recall what I said to Baba, but after I left the room and I was out in the corridor and people were walking about, I was very dissatisfied with my performance in there because he was so important and I had such a brief moment with him. I was very dissatisfied about how I had used that brief moment. And so that thought just preoccupied me with great intensity, and I stood out there. I was trying to catch a small glimpse of Baba when the door would open and another person would emerge into the corridor. I was thinking, I wanted to see him. I was thinking of him as being infinite kindness, infinite compassion,